Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Toby Johncox and I am the head of mortgage sales for Enness Global Mortgages. And I'm joined here by my good friend, smooth operator and senior client partner at Artorius Wealth, Jordan Williams. Jordan, how are you doing?
Very well. Good afternoon to everybody. Great to be on the show. Honour and a privilege to join you, Toby.
My pleasure. So just start by telling me a little bit about what Artorius is.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. Artorius is an independently owned wealth advisory business providing investment management and family office solutions tailored to meet our clients' needs and objectives. I work with a number of international families based in the UK and overseas and focus on advising and overseeing their overall wealth position.
Fantastic. And today we're discussing what is, I think, a really critical topic for for everyone at the moment, which is 5 things that families should be thinking about on their wealth in the current market. That's COVID, and putting those plans into place. What are the main things you're seeing, or what are the main questions since the New World Order has come to play that your families are asking you?
Yeah, over the past 3 months, it is possible to summarise the nature of the conversations we've been having with a number of the families we look after and those who we're in contact with. There have been 5 main themes, I would say, that we think sort of should capture the attention of any wealthy family during this current time. And I think sort of the purpose of this webinar today is sort of to allude to those sort of 5 things which I think and we think that any wealthy family should be thinking about in the current environment. Sort of starting off, I think the first thing that many families are now thinking about and have certainly thought about over the last 3 months is whether they actually understand their investment portfolios. There's no doubt that the events of the past 3 months and the effect that COVID-19 has had on financial markets, especially in early to mid-March, should make any wealthy family want to review their existing wealth management strategy to ensure it's appropriate to their circumstances and their risk and return profile. So often we see the situation where families have no comprehension of how their wealth has been invested and what specific investments they have actually invested in, let alone understanding how these investments work and the risks associated with them. And it's obviously easy when markets are rising and investments are performing positively, but as we have seen, unfortunately, severe shocks can come without warning, and it's therefore important for families to be aware of the exposures they have within their portfolios and where their risks are. And we know that often individuals think they're achieving diversification by having a number of different managers, but often at no fault of those managers. They're often running similar strategies, and in turn doing so, they're duplicating the number of positions and thereby creating significant concentrations of risk within their portfolio. And that's been...
Just to cut in there, I think the analogy is, the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, but if you put all your eggs in different baskets that are the same basket, it's the same difference, right? And I guess having a number of wealth managers, if they're all investing in the same funds in any case, you're as exposed as you would be if you were just with one guy putting it in the same place. So it's an interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, it's no fault of those investment managers, and it's rare that investment managers will talk to each other, and so they have no idea what the other 2, for example, investment managers will be investing in. They're adhering to a mandate that's been agreed by their client, but it's often the case that mandate is very similar, if not the same, running the same strategy and often holding the same securities as the other managers. So that's definitely been an issue for many, and which many have been sort of looking at over the last couple of months. And I think the other key point within that in understanding the portfolio is actually understanding sort of their debt positions as well. And many wealthy families will be using debt as part of their overall investment strategy, whether that's debt built into some of the investments and products they've invested into, and often debt which is secured against the portfolios that they have built. But again, similar to sort of the investment strategy which these families have, they're not often aware about how this debt is actually working, what their contractual obligations are with this debt, and unfortunately what we saw for many is that when markets fell, the value of their portfolios fell, but obviously the value of their debt remained the same. And many were concerned about, issues such as shortfalls and funding margin calls, and even the threat of sort of forced sales.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen that in the world of real estate as well, where, a number of people end up overexposed on property. So look, once an investment manager or wealth manager has helped you to understand your general investment portfolio, you've got a good feel for what you've got in there. And you can see, what do you then do with that cash or whatever other investments you have?
Yeah, I think that's obviously a very pertinent question, and it's a question which many are probably thinking right now, and sort of that's a second sort of key theme which is coming out, is actually what is the right strategy for me, and for many right now there is a lot of people sitting on cash, waiting in the sidelines, obviously wanting to see what's going on and out there. Well, obviously, the constantly changing world which we're in right now, where there's huge uncertainty about what the future holds due to COVID-19, the looming global recession that's undoubtedly upon us, and the undoubted negative effects on earnings, employment, on welfare. There are questions about what should you be investing in, and there is undoubtedly a pressure on many, which probably a lot of people are feeling. They see the markets increasing almost on a daily basis right now, and a pressure to enter into the market, maybe get caught in getting caught in the race to identify and buy cheap stocks. But we think is that for any family, they should be sort of a family's got a long-term investment objective. They should be taking the time to sort of take stock and actually consider focusing on long-term quality assets rather than sort of heading straight in. They've got to think about what's actually right for them and building a strategy which is appropriate to their circumstances. Importantly, a strategy which is appropriate to their risk profile, their return objectives, importantly their liquidity preferences and investment horizon. And not many, many won't ever ask those questions before. We know that there's many clients who never have thought about this, whether sort of historically or even before sort of the COVID-19 sort of crisis. Getting the right asset allocation is key to helping them achieve their objectives, and they may not be receiving that guidance about which geographies, which asset classes and sectors may recover the quickest, and those that should be sort of cautious of. And in line with what we've just spoken about, it's also important to ensure that whatever new strategies are being implemented, they should seek to complement their existing portfolios rather than sort of duplicate what they've already got.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it a lot on the mortgage side. This once in a lifetime opportunity to invest in some form of asset. We're doing a lot of capital raising on real estate for people to do so. But I think it's prudent what you say there. It's not just about buying something because it's cheap in this world order. It's about taking that long-term perspective. Just because a stock's worth nothing now doesn't mean it's worth buying, right? Or whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and obviously every family's situation is different, and there is no one size fits all solution for every family. But in the main, most families do have a long-term investment horizon. They've got that ability to think long-term. They're not, most of the families certainly that we look after, they're not investors for the short term, 1 to 3 years. They're thinking about sort of 10 plus, 15 plus years, even longer actually, and thinking about investing for the next generation and even, the generation after that. So, implementing the right strategy, the right asset allocation and thinking about not just diving in and buying what appears to be cheap today, but actually, what's actually going to be sustainable and right for them in the future.
Yes. And you mentioned that sort of planning for succession, the next generation, not just looking at your initial wealth, what we can do today, what your family can have in the future. And it moves us really nicely on to, I guess, the next point, which is how do you make sure once your wealth has been built or what are we suggesting people do once their wealth has been built? How do they protect that for future generations?
Yeah, I would say, one of the key discussions that I have and we as a business have with our clients is about thinking about the next generation and how can mum and dad pass their wealth down onto their children in the most efficient manner, and even sort of provide for their grandchildren as well, because often a family might have significant amounts of wealth that they might not need in their lifetime. So again, they can they're starting to think about actually having that wealth sort of succeed down the generations. And unfortunately, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it has made the risk of a sudden succession event become a potential reality. And wealthy families often have complex financial affairs with assets situated in a number of jurisdictions within various structures. And it's so important, therefore, that the key family members, patriarch and matriarch, mum and dad, to ensure they have the correct rules in place to allow for an efficient transfer of their estate to their chosen beneficiaries, passing on their wealth in the way they want. And, as not having a will or having wills which are not appropriate to their current circumstances can lead to significant problems in how their assets are distributed upon death. And, it's a regular occurrence that, we're chatting when we meet new families that actually they either have no wills in place or they don't have the appropriate wills. They have one will which they think covers their entire worldwide estate, but actually, in fact, it only would cover the assets in that particular jurisdiction. And, as you know from the clients that you look after, Toby, most wealthy families have assets outside of one particular jurisdiction. They might have assets in the UK and in Dubai, in Jersey, in Switzerland, and in other locations. And it's key that they have the right rules in place to cover those assets in the event of death.
Exactly. Just having that one will registered in London, that although it might describe all your assets globally, it doesn't actually necessarily, or it's not enforceable, should we say, in all the various jurisdictions. And the main one, I guess, that's worth noting is that sort of Sharia versus the Western world and how they pass assets down through generations and through family.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that, and just on the point about sort of succession planning, decision making, and protecting the estate, again, sort of similar with wills, where families haven't sort of taken the time or haven't even thought about ensuring these, they're in place. And let's be honest, these aren't the sexiest of subjects for people to talk about. I think people seem to want to have discussions about investing their wealth and buying whether it's real estate or buying into specific financial investments. The idea of sitting down and talking about a will, and as we'll come on to shortly, talking about life insurance, it's one of those things that almost they know they have to do, but almost they'll find any excuse not to actually do it at that particular time. But what we have certainly noticed is that during this time, obviously, people watching the news, seeing what's going on, unfortunately, out there, and undoubtedly having more time at home, they are now starting to think about, actually, do we have the right protections in place? And along with the wills, we would argue it's absolutely imperative that any wealthy family, and indeed anyone, should have the right lasting powers of attorneys in place. And I'm never surprised by the number of families who don't have these documents in place, and they're vital for key family members, because in the event of mental and or physical incapacity, so without these documents, who is going to make the decisions on their behalf with respect to their property and financial affairs and their health and welfare if they themselves can't do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. We're talking today about 5 core things that people should be doing now in the market in order to plan their wealth. We're not talking about going out and buying a really exciting Ferrari or a yacht or a helicopter or something, but a yacht, car, helicopter won't protect you against the inevitable parts of life. So once you've handed that stuff, all your assets down through the generation, you touched on it there before, the life insurance. Why would you take life insurance? Why is it important to look at your life insurance?
Yeah, again, it's not the most exciting of topics, and certainly not the most positive of things to be thinking about. But again, in the current climate that we're in, it's noticeable the increase in the number of conversations we're having with families about making sure they've got adequate life insurance in place to provide for their loved ones in the event of death. It provides it, having the right life cover, provides the family with that comfort that there are sufficient funds available to meet future liabilities and commitments. If there wasn't that cover in place, how does the surviving spouse, or even, how do the children ensure that they can maintain their standard of living? They don't need to dispose of any assets that were in the estate to actually fund, their commitments and liabilities and lifestyle sort of going forward. So that's why, first step, why that's so important. And the other sort of reason for ensuring that, one has appropriate life insurance in place is that, is to provide that liquidity in the event there's a significant inheritance tax liability to pay. And that's obviously, one of the main reasons is, why, families will, want to take out life insurance to make sure that actually there is that liquidity in place immediately, or at least very quickly, to settle any liability that may arise as a result of death. So they're the two main reasons that obviously that we are helping our clients to really think about actually, have they got that right life insurance in place? Is it structured correctly? Again, making sure that any traditional life insurance policy, where appropriate, is written into trust, and therefore ensuring that beneficiaries can actually receive the full benefit of that. And it's also a good time to actually, during this time, think about whether actually, if they have got life insurance in place, making sure, sort of assessing whether that's the most appropriate sort of policy, whether they've got the most appropriate policies, whether there are better policies out there, for more affordable premiums.
Well, that's exactly it, because you'll see, like I've seen all the time, people kind of collect these things over years and years, whether it's through employment or through a mortgage they've taken and been sold and just signed a piece of paper. And they may already have life insurance, but when you have a conversation with them about what their life insurance is, very few people actually know the core benefits of what they've got in a policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And many people will have inherited or at least have benefited from life insurance policies from their employers, so death and service sort of benefit, but they may no longer be with their employer anymore, but have not sort of realised that actually that level of cover that they had once had is no longer available to them, and they haven't gone out and sought to sort of replace that. And obviously, people's circumstances change all the time, so is absolutely essential to sort of review the measures and the cover that you've got in place now to make sure it's fit for purpose today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've discussed understanding your investment portfolio. We've gotten a key on, when you understand that, maybe what you need to do to make sure it's best utilised. Making sure that wealth's passed on through generations, and obviously that's protected when it is passed on. But I guess, how does someone keep track of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. Everyone leads incredibly busy lives. People have their jobs, they've got their families to look after, there's sort of other concerns. But I think, one thing, well, there's many things which, the current environment has taught us and made us think about. But certainly, what I'm certainly thinking about for my family, my family, not just the families I'm looking after on a professional basis, is actually about, understanding the importance of ensuring that, one's affairs are in order and appropriate to their circumstances. And by doing that and ensuring that there's regular oversight of your wealth, which undoubtedly helps lead to better preparedness, better decision making, and of course sort of better governance of the family estate. There are, so again, numerous examples which I've seen where many wealthy families, their estate is so large, they don't often know what their wealth balance sheet looks like from on a month to month or a quarter to quarter basis across all their structures, across all their assets. And they won't know about their asset allocation, they won't know about their currency allocation, which obviously then, which going back to what we discussed earlier, might mean they're not aware of the risks that they have within their estate. They don't know how their investment managers are performing, and so how on earth can they sort of keep their feet to the fire and hold them to account to ensure that they're on track to meeting their sort of strategy and their objectives. and they're often not aware of their liquidity position as well, you know, and having accurate details of their capital commitments and liabilities over the next sort of 12 to 18 months or so. So, you know, having that sort of oversight is absolutely key. Again, it's not easy to do that. It does take time, and it does take sort of, you know, the mindset to really grapple and actually bring everything together and have also have sort of open and honest conversations with other key family members. And it's, you know, and that's a really important point again, which we're obviously where appropriate during this time, we are encouraging families to, you know, to engage with other family members, maybe their children who are of an age now where they can actually understand and actually can appreciate, you know, the family dynamic in terms of sort of the wealth that they have, because, you know, it's quite often that, you know, key family members aren't fully aware of the family's overall wealth position. Usually the knowledge and information is kept by, you know, the patriarch and matriarch of the family, and it sort of that highlights the importance of having an up-to-date, centralized and accurate sort of filing system, which can be sort of ideally accessed anywhere in the world. Because if something were to happen to mum or dad, how would other family members know how to access that family wealth? Where would they look? Who would they sort of contact? And so, you know, having, you know, again, going back to your question about, you know, how do people keep track? How do they oversee their wealth, and why is that important? That's exactly the reason now, and unfortunately, there's probably many families having those exact conversations about actually what does our wealth look like? How do we access that wealth? Who should we be talking about? Who should we be talking to? You know, to assist us, because they haven't had that conversation. They haven't been focusing on organising their affairs over the past sort of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we joked about it earlier, but, you know, people who don't realise they have assets all over the world, well, certainly if you have assets all over the world, how do you know necessarily where they are? And obviously when the matriarch passes, often things get lost if they're not documented correctly, which is obviously the responsibility of professional advisors. So it's a topic I've talked on a lot really throughout the series of webinars, which is, you know, and it's another part of that, which is building a team around you to manage your wealth. And maybe biasly, we've spoken more on the real estate side of things from a legal, tax, mortgage advisor, real estate professional perspective. But I think that's doubled down on the other side of things, where, you know, real estate is very tangible. Investments, your investment advisors and your wealth managers, you know, they're managing your intangible sort of assets globally, and it's critical to have someone that's well versed who can look after and make sure that's reported back to you and to your family well. So I think that's 5 top points, or your 5 main things that families should be looking at during this current world market that we're in. We've got a little bit of time now for some Q&A.
Great.
So if anyone's questions, please jump into the Q&A. Jordan's going to do his best to answer them, so hopefully someone's got some tricky questions for him. Right, second. So let's start with one more easy question. So look, great webinar. Where does someone start, and how does someone begin to organise themselves to sort of satisfy these 5 top tips?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, there is, where to start. You can start in many sort of, there are many places where you can start. I think the key thing is actually to ascertain and understand what it is you've got within your estate. So, you know, first of all, understanding where you have, so what assets you have, where they're held, and understanding who's actually in charge of those sort of assets. And so when we're working with families who come to us and, you know, they ask exactly that same question, you know, the first thing we do, we want to know about them. We want to actually understand what their asset sort of position looks like today. And also understanding what their objectives are, for the future. And we then would look to build this consolidated report that I sort of alluded to, whereby all the information relating to their estate sort of can be captured. And by having that understanding of what you got today, one can then sort of analyze and assess actually, let's have a look at those concentration of risk. Let's actually have a look at whether the mandates that you've got within your investment portfolios are appropriate to your circumstances, whether they're actually going to go about sort of achieving your stated objectives. So, first and foremost, it's about understanding what you've got, but at the same time also understanding what you want to achieve. There is no one size fits all solution for this. Every family is different. Every family is going to have a different objective as to what they want to achieve with their wealth. And so certainly when families come to us, it's our role to sort of probe in a nice way to understand what it is they're trying to achieve, with their wealth, and then understanding whether the measures they've got in place are appropriate. And absolutely key to that is working with their existing advisors. So, they will, undoubtedly have a team of people around them. And what we find is that, with our involvement, is actually, we want to work in collaboration and bring the team of advisors together, because, so often someone might have their tax advisor, their accountant and their lawyer and their, sort of trustworthy mortgage broker such as yourself, but actually very rarely do they talk to each other.
Exactly.
And so, they have separate conversations with each of these advisors. But, the key to actually, in answer to your question about how does one start and organise their affairs, it's about bringing all their advisors sort of together to actually, help devise a plan for the future.
Yeah, that sort of, again, going back to that team and that collaborative sort of model where transparent and everyone's trying to help reach a common goal for
Correct.
the client. So that's a great answer. Thank you for that. The next question is, if I'm going to invest, what should I be investing in, and where should I invest?
Well, Toby, if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be slightly wealthier than I am now.
You might talking to me about managing wealth. You'd be having sort of
absolutely correct. I'm coming to you for a huge mortgage, but. Yeah, I mean, it all depends, really. There is, again, sort of using the expression I just used, there is no one size fits all. And, everyone is different. What might be right and suitable for one client is not going to be right and suitable for another client. So it's about going back. It's about understanding what it is, the client's trying to achieve with their wealth, what their investment horizon is, what their risk profile is, what their return objectives are. In order to actually sort of satisfy, and once we've ascertained that, then we can actually sort of go about devising what the right investment strategy is.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And the final question then, what is the best way to monitor your wealth?
Yeah, again, sort of that's, sort of similar to sort of question one, best way to monitor your wealth, it is, we've certainly seen the benefits that the families have derived from having consolidated reporting across their affairs. Typically, wealthy families will get portfolio valuations and statements from their banks and other traditional wealth managers. But again, they're in isolation. They're just in relation to that particular relationship. But by having a consolidated report that brings in all their different sort of investment portfolios, and not just investment assets as well, but their property holdings and their, holdings in yachts and jets and art and fine wine, and their debt positions and other liabilities. By bringing all that together into a consolidated report, it's a great way of actually understanding what the client's overall sort of wealth is, monitoring it on a month-to-month or quarterly or quarter-to-quarter basis, understanding the movements, understanding how different investments are performing, how those investments are performing according to specific benchmarks that have been created, understanding the fees that the clients are paying, not just to their investment managers, but to all their service providers. Having that oversight over your wealth, again, sort of leads to that better decision making, and making sort of other key members sort of more informed about over their wealth position.
Yeah, and I guess there's that monitoring side, which is having everything in one place and in an easy to read format, but equally taking the time. I mean, our clients are ultra high net worth global citizens who don't have the time to go through bank statements, look through portfolio statements, even if they're, a number of their different advisors are sharing those monthly with them. The chances of you looking at every page is almost, it's an impossible scenario. These guys are busy people, so having professionals who can do that for you and identify, I mean, the sort of lost fees, should we say, is probably
Yes.
the most one is. So it's critical to have someone that can look after everything in one place.
It's certainly about optimizing sort of optimizing the positions that you have. And as you say, by identifying where savings can be made, identifying actually, an investment strategy that might work better, for you. So, are you in the right investment strategy for what you're trying to achieve? And by doing, and by moving, and by making something and by going to something that's more appropriate, hopefully will lead to sort of enhanced returns for you. So again, you can't do that if you're not looking at things as a whole. And if you're doing it piecemeal, it's not going to be as effective for sure.
Yeah, perfect. And actually, one more question's flown in from Priyank. Thanks for hosting the webinar. I think maybe this is a question we'll answer together because it sits in both of our sort of scope. What is the feedback from clients regarding London property, and what are you advising them? So my 2 pence on this, and I think it goes back similarly to your investment point earlier, which is, yeah, the market's down. It's a really interesting time to buy real estate, but it's about still buying the right real estate. Don't just buy something because it seems cheap. Because ultimately those areas that will benefit from the back of COVID, the places with outside space, maybe the extra bedrooms or whatever it might be, those are the areas that will see huge demand. What are your thoughts on that one as well?
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think that, I think the London, residential market still has huge appeal to many. London still is, obviously a global city which has many attractions, and we're still, certainly from clients of ours, we're still seeing people moving to the UK to want to sort of send their kids to school here, wanting to start up businesses here, even in the current environment. And I think the London property market is still, and it has shown over many, many years to be resilient. There have been, as you know, undoubted challenges to the market, the numerous tax changes that have taken place, uncertainty over Brexit, uncertainty over sort of change of government risk, but it has shown to be resilient. But as you say, it all goes back to buying quality. And if you're buying in the right property, if you're buying the right property in the right location, and you can understand what the correct price is, there are still opportunities out there. I think as you allude to, things are changing in terms of what people want. They're undoubtedly going to want more outside space, to be able to, to utilize, whether that's outside space attached to the property, to the, apartment, or the house itself, or whether access to local parks and other amenities. But I definitely think there are sort of opportunities out there, and there are places in London which are still showing showing to be incredibly popular in the current environment, and whereas others, the ones which traditionally were popular, some of the areas which had significant new build, they're shown to be less less popular now, especially amongst sort of international buyers.
Yeah, sure. And I think we can all agree, I mean, a lot of the people listening today will be based throughout the Middle East. Very good value mortgage rates available to international clients. Dollar versus the pound still remains a good exchange. And then the market in London has probably seen a good amount of subsidence in value. So those three things make it a really interesting time for people to buy real estate. But it's that buying quality, buying a good product that's going to see good appreciation in the longer term. So that, I think, is the last of our questions, which leaves me just to say thank you, Jordan, for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been good. We've had a good couple of years of a relationship, and it's good to finally pin you down to talk about something more business oriented. So thank you for joining me today. How do people get in touch if they want to?
They can visit our website, which is www.artorius.com, and I will share, and so Toby, if you'd be kind enough to perhaps sort of share my contact details at the end of this webinar, then that would be great. But I'm obviously accessible. I'm not going anywhere, so I'm accessible over phone, email, but yeah, please do share my contact details.
Just you, the running machine, and your laptop, I think, no?
Yes, absolutely.
So look, brilliant. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I've circulated the emails in the chat function. So if anyone's interested in getting in touch, please do. And a copy or recording of this will go live on YouTube as well to view later. So thanks very much, everyone. And thank you, Jordan. Cheers.
Thank you. Goodbye.